My name is Emma Davis. I'm 24 years old, and the night I learned my life had been rewritten without my permission began at a restaurant that smelled like garlic bread and disappointment. It was supposed to be my graduation dinner. Nothing flashy. Nothing expensive, just my family pretending we were close enough to celebrate something together. We'd barely been seated for 10 seconds when my grandfather lifted his glass toward me. Grandpa Lucas was the only person in my family who ever made me feel seen. He was quiet, gentle, and careful with his words, which is why the sentence he spoke next didn't feel careless at all. So, Emma, are you using the $850,000 education fund I set up for you? The room didn't go silent. It fell off a cliff. My mom's hand froze midair, knife suspended over her plate. My dad's face drained of color, almost gray. My brother Ryan's jaw dropped open so wide he looked cartoonish. And me? I just stared at Grandpa. What? Fund? I asked, my voice barely there. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And when you hear the rest of this story, I want you to answer honestly. What would you do if you found out your entire future was taken from you, and you were the only one who didn't know it? Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss how this unfolds. Trust me, it gets intense. Growing up, my family looked fine from the outside. We smiled for holiday cards, hosted barbecues, and appeared functional enough that no one asked questions. But inside our house, there was a clear, invisible hierarchy. At the top was Ryan, my older brother, the family prodigy. At the bottom was me, the responsible one, the girl who didn't cause trouble, who didn't expect much, who was expected to manage on her own. If Ryan needed something, the world shifted. Sat tutors. Of course! A new laptop. Done. Club fees. Paid. When he crashed his car senior year, my parents replaced it before the tow truck even left the driveway. Me. I learned how to patch my own problems with duct tape and late nights. When I struggled in math, Mom told me YouTube had great free resources. When I needed money for textbooks, Dad sighed dramatically about how expensive everything was. When I joined clubs, I paid the fees myself with whatever I earned from babysitting or tutoring younger students. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't bitterness. It was silence. And silence taught me the rules. Ryan gets support. Emma gets speeches about independence. College made the gap feel like a canyon. Primera worked part-time at a bookstore, part-time at a cafe, and part-time at staying awake in class. I lived off cheap noodles, recycled notebooks, and hope. My parents constantly said, "We wish we could help," yet somehow they always found a way to help Ryan. But nothing, not a single moment prepared me for that dinner table truth. Because when Grandpa mentioned an $850,000 fund, I saw something flicker in my parents' eyes. Recognition, fear, guilt. Like they knew exactly what he meant, and exactly why I didn't. Grandpa's smile faded as he looked from me to my parents and back again. The confusion on his face was genuine. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice low. "The trust was set up when you were born, Emma. It was supposed to cover your entire university education, and 10 so I made sure of it." My dad finally broke his silence. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie like it was choking him. "Dad, this isn't the time or place," he said, shooting a nervous glance at the other diners nearby. My mom jumped in, her voice strained and unnaturally high-pitched. "Lucas, you must be mistaken. There was no fund. Maybe it was an idea we talked about, but it never happened. Emma's done wonderfully on her own. We're so proud of her resourcefulness." The word hit me like a slap. All those nights I spent crying over tuition bills, all the events I missed because I had to work, all the stress that felt like a permanent weight on my chest, that was whose resourcefulness to them. I looked at Ryan. He was avoiding my gaze, staring intently at his water glass. He knew. Of course he knew. "Mistaken?" Grandpa's voice was sharp now. "I'm not mistaken. I have the paperwork. I get annual statements. The account has been active. There have been withdrawals. Withdrawals?" The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. I turned my head slowly to face my parents. My mom wouldn't look at me. My dad was staring daggers at his own father. The entire story clicked into place in a horrifying, sickening rush. The new car for Ryan. His tuition for that fancy private college. His spring break trips. His seed money for a business that never took off. It wasn't just that they didn't help me. It was that they took what was mine and gave it to him. You used it, I whispered. It wasn't a question. You used my money. For him. My mother finally looked at me, and her expression wasn't one of apology. It was defensive. Emma, you don't understand. Ryan needed it. He had opportunities. Real potential. You were always so capable. We knew you'd be fine. Fine. My voice started to rise, and I didn't care who heard. I wasn't fine. I was drowning. I worked 3 jobs while you were funding his potential with my future. You stood by and watched me struggle, knowing there was almost $1 million with my name on it. My dad slammed his hand on the table. That's enough, Emma. It was a family decision. The money was for the family, and we decided how best to use it. It wasn't for the family. I shot back, my whole body trembling with a rage I'd never felt before. Grandpa just said it was for me. For my education. Grandpa Lucas looked devastated. He stared at my parents, his own son and daughter-in-law, as if he were seeing them for the first time. What have you done? He asked, his voice shaking with disappointment. What have you done to her? Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. I pushed my chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. I couldn't breathe in that room anymore. I couldn't look at their faces. The family I thought was merely neglectful was actually something far worse. They were thieves. I have to go, I choked out, grabbing my purse. Emma, wait. My mom pleaded, reaching for my arm. I pulled away like her touch was fire. Don't, I said, my voice cold and final. Don't ever speak to me again. I walked out of that restaurant, leaving my so-called family sitting in the ruins of their lies. The smell of garlic bread now just smelled like betrayal. As I stood on the sidewalk in the cool night air, one thought echoed in my mind. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. They took my past, but I'll be damned if I let them take my future, too. So, what happens next? How do you even begin to fight back against your own family? That's what we're going to get into in the next video. Make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because this is just getting started. Thanks for watching. The moment Grandpa Lucas asked about the fund at dinner, the air around us didn't just tense, it hardened. My parents froze, looking like statues carved out of pure fear. My brother, Ryan, suddenly became fascinated by a piece of bread on his plate, refusing to look up. But Grandpa just waited, his glass still in hand, smiling at me as if everything was perfectly normal. Dad cleared his throat, the sound so sharp it felt like it could cut glass. Dad, let's not do this here. Grandpa didn't even blink. Why not? Emma should know. I set aside that money for her future. For her education. For her freedom. Freedom. That one word hit me harder than anything else that night. Mom forced a laugh so high-pitched it sounded painful. The food is coming soon. Let's just enjoy the evening, please. But Grandpa wasn't letting it go. He turned back to me. Size kind. Sweetheart, I just assumed you used the funds. Your father told me everything was taken care of. I'm so proud of you for graduating without any debt. My stomach dropped into a black hole. Without debt, I had 3 student loans hanging over my head. I had worked 2 part-time jobs at one point, tutoring in the early mornings and pulling cashier shifts late at night. I had cried in campus bathrooms more times than I could ever admit. I bought textbooks secondhand or sometimes not at all. I skipped meals. I rationed everything, down to the last penny. Debt-free, I was drowning in it. I looked at my parents. They couldn't even meet my eyes. Their gazes were fixed on the tablecloth, on laps anywhere but on me. The silence was deafening, filled with all the things they weren't saying. Just then, the waiter arrived with our plates, the clatter scattering the tension like broken glass. But the questions had already exploded inside my head. The rest of dinner was a blur. Everyone pretended nothing happened, carefully avoiding Grandpa's gaze and speaking in short, clipped sentences. We ate quickly, the delicious food tasting like ash in my mouth. When we got home, I went straight to my room without even saying goodnight. Sleep was impossible. The ceiling felt like it was pressing down on me, and my thoughts were a chaotic storm. If that fund existed, where did it go? And why was this the first I was hearing about it? Then, a memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. An afternoon when I was 17, I had swung by the house to grab a sweater before heading to a study group. As I walked through the garage, I noticed something tucked behind old camping gear, a cracked plastic bin. Inside, half visible, was a thick, formal-looking envelope. I recognized the elegant, looping handwriting instantly. It was my grandfather's. The front read, "To Michael and Susan, my parents' names." Curious and a little confused, I reached for it. My fingers had just brushed the paper when Mom appeared out of nowhere. So fast, it was like she had been waiting in the shadows. "Emma, don't touch that," she snapped, her voice sharp. Then, just as quickly, she softened it, forcing a smile. "It's just old paperwork. Honey, nothing interesting." She took the envelope from my hand, or rather, ripped it away and shoved it into a drawer she always kept locked. Her smile never reached her eyes. I knew that look. It was the same one she always had when she was lying. At the time, I'd shrugged it off. I was a teenager. Parents had their own boring adult secrets, and I figured it had nothing to do with me. But now, looking back, I saw it for what it truly was. It was a warning sign I completely missed. A critical clue I didn't even know was a clue. The pieces were starting to click into place, forming a picture I didn't want to see. The next morning, I woke up with a single, pounding truth in my chest. If my grandfather really created an 8-100-50-1000- dollar fund for me, someone knew about it, and that someone made absolutely sure I never, ever found out. The betrayal felt like a physical weight, crushing me. I wasn't just going to let this go. I had to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. This was just the beginning. I barely slept after that dinner. My mind just kept replaying the way my parents reacted. Like the mention of that fund was a grenade dropped right in the middle of the table. By morning, I felt hollowed out and wired at the same time. Like my nerves were stuck somewhere between pure rage and complete disbelief. My parents, on the other hand, acted normal. Too normal. Mom was humming while making coffee. Dad scrolled through his emails like he hadn't just lied to me by omission for years. And Ryan, my brother, he was just eating his cereal loudly, as if the crunching could somehow drown out the truth hanging in the air. But I couldn't pretend. Not anymore. "Mom," I said, my voice cutting through the fake morning bliss. "I need to talk to you." Her humming stopped instantly. Dad's spoon froze midair. Even Ryan's crunching slowed to a crawl. The whole room held its breath. Mom turned, plastering on her soft, practiced smile. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" "The fund Grandpa mentioned," I said, my voice flat. "What happened to it?" Dad dropped his spoon. It clattered against his ceramic bowl, a sound that was way too sharp. Way too telling. Mom's eyes flicked toward him for just half a second, but I saw it. Panic. Guilt. Something. "Honey, ... double quotes." She cleared her throat, trying to buy time. "It's single quotes." "No," I cut her off. "It's not. It's a yes or no question. Was there an $850,000 education fund set up for me?" Silence. A thick, suffocating silence filled the kitchen. Dad let out a deep, heavy sigh, a sound that made my stomach twist into a tight knot. "We'll explain everything," he said, his voice low. "But not now. We just need some time." Time. They had years. They had my entire Life. I grabbed my bag and walked out before I said something I couldn't take back. The moment the front door slammed shut behind me, my legs took over, carrying me somewhere I hadn't been in months. My parents' garage, something deep inside me. A primal need screamed for answers, and I knew exactly where to look. The garage smelled like dust and old paint cans. I flicked on the single bare bulb, my heart pounding against my ribs. I walked straight to the old filing cabinet, to the drawer Mom had locked all those years ago. The memory of her snatching that envelope from me, her face a mask of panic, burned in my mind. But when I reached for it, the drawer wasn't locked anymore. It slid open with a soft groan. It was almost like someone had forgotten to hide their secrets before going to bed. My hands shook as I started pulling things out. Papers, old bills, receipts, a thick stack of my old school forms. But under all that clutter, there it was. A manila folder. And on the tab, in my grandfather's neat, familiar handwriting, education fund documentation, Emma, my throat tightened. I could barely swallow. I opened it. Inside were copied checks, dates, bank transfers, all addressed to my parents, all tied to an account with my name on it. The amounts were huge. $50,000 at a time, $100,000 another time. Deposited over the course of years. Every single page felt like a fresh betrayal. Then I found something worse. A statement. It showed the fund's current balance. It wasn't $850,000. It was zero. It had been completely emptied. Little by little. Transaction by transaction. And the last withdrawal, 3 years ago. The exact time Ryan needed a sudden influx of cash for a so-called business opportunity. My vision blurred with tears of rage. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone, but I took pictures of everything. Every check, every statement, every single piece of evidence in that folder. Just as I was pocketing my phone, a shadow fell over me. Emma. It was my dad's voice. I froze, my back to him. He stepped closer, his footsteps echoing in the quiet garage. What are you doing in here? I turned slowly, holding the folder in front of me like a shield. Tell me the truth, I said, my voice breaking. Did you spend my future? Dad didn't speak. He didn't have to. His silence, the way his face crumpled with guilt, told me everything I needed to know. And in that moment, I knew the people I trusted most in the world hadn't just taken money from me. They'd taken years. They'd stolen possibilities. They'd stolen my future, and I was just getting started. I wasn't done digging, not by a long shot. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow for the next part of the story. Dad's silence sat between us, like a wall, thick and heavy. His shoulders slumped, his eyes dropped to the concrete floor of the garage, and for a moment, he looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. But I didn't feel sorry. Not even a little. All I felt was betrayal. This hollow, gutted feeling that made me feel stupid for never questioning anything sooner. Say something? I whispered, my voice barely audible. I clutched the manila folder to my chest as if it were a shield. It contained everything: bank statements, letters from Grandpa, the proof of a future that had been stolen from me without my knowledge. Please. Dad rubbed his temple. A gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when he was stressed. But this was different. This wasn't about work or bills. This was about me. Emma, you don't understand the situation. A bitter laugh almost escaped my lips. Then explain it. I shot back, my voice gaining strength. Explain how my college fund, the one Grandpa sent money for every single year since I was born, is empty. Explain why I found these statements hidden in a box labeled old tax records. But before he could even try to answer, Mom appeared in the doorway that led from the kitchen to the garage. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a familiar panic. Michael, she said softly, her voice strained. Stop. Stop! My head whipped toward her. Stop what? Stop telling the truth. Stop finally answering for what he'd done. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anger and disbelief. Mom hurried over, her movements quick and nervous. She reached for the open drawer of the filing cabinet, the one I'd just pulled the folder from, and tried to close it, as if shutting the drawer could somehow reverse the damage, could put the genie back in the bottle. "Emma, sweetheart, let's go inside," she pleaded, trying to take my arm. "We can sit down and talk about this calmly." I pulled away from her touch. "No," I said, my voice firm. "We're not going anywhere. We're talking right here, right now." Mom exchanged a panicked look with Dad, the kind they always thought kids never noticed. It was a silent conversation I'd been watching my whole life, full of shared secrets and unspoken agreements. This time, I was finally demanding a translation. She let out a long, shaky breath and sank onto the old folding chair by the workbench, the one covered in sawdust and old paint stains. "Your grandfather meant well," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "He always has. But he didn't understand everything we were dealing with back then." "What were you dealing with?" I pressed, my grip on the folder tightening. "Because from what I can see in these papers, you were dealing with my fund." Mom flinched, as if I'd slapped her. "It wasn't like that, honey. It was never about taking from you." "Then tell me how it was," I insisted, my patience wearing patience. Dad, who had been silent this whole time, finally leaned against a dusty shelf stacked with half-empty paint cans. His voice was low, heavy, with a shame that was years overdue. "A few years after the 2008 crash, my company downsized. I lost my job. We fell behind on everything. The mortgage, the car payments, the bills. Emergencies kept popping up, one after another. We were drowning. Emma." He paused, unable to look me in the eye. "Your grandfather sent that money every year for your birthday, for Christmas. And instead of letting the house go into foreclosure, instead of telling everyone we were failing, You used it?" I cut in, the words exploding out of me. "You used my money. Without asking me, without even telling me it existed." My voice cracked on the last word. All those years, I'd just thought Grandpa sent a card with $20 in it. I had no idea there was an entire account, a future, being built for me. Dad's face tightened, his jaw clenched with shame. He just nodded, a tiny, defeated movement. Mom jumped in, her words rushing out to defend him, to defend Tim. "We always planned to pay it back. We were going to replace it all once things got better. Once your father was back on his feet." "When?" I demanded, the dam of my composure finally breaking. "When were you going to do that? After I graduated with tens of thousands of dollars in student debt, after my loans piled up so high I couldn't see a way out? Was it after I was working 2 jobs through college just to afford groceries, while you kept giving my brother Ryan money for his car, for his rent, for his latest project?" Her mouth opened, then closed. No answer came. The truth of my words hung in the air, more painful than any lie they had ever told. And then, a new, colder realization washed over me. Ryan, my older brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Did he know? I asked, my voice dropping to a near whisper. Did Ryan know about the fund? The reaction was immediate and telling. Mom froze completely, her face a mask of guilt. Dad turned his head and stared intently at a cobweb in the corner of the garage ceiling, anything to avoid my gaze. He didn't know everything, Mom finally managed to say, her voice trembling. But he knew some money came from Grandpa for family support. Family support. The words echoed in my head. They had taken my future, a gift meant specifically for me, and relabeled it family support. A slush fund to patch up their financial mistakes and to prop up my brother. And Ryan, of course, was always the part of the family that needed the most support. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was broken, bitter, and full of a pain so deep it felt like it was tearing me apart from the inside. "So," I began, my voice shaking with rage and sorrow. "So when I was skipping meals to save money for textbooks, You had my future in a drawer. When primera cold NAT, afford to fix my car, and had to take the bus for 2 hours each way to my campus job, you were helping Ryan with his car payment. When I cried myself to sleep at night because I didn't know how I was going to pay next month's rents, my voice cracked, and tears I'd been holding back finally started to fall. You had my future, my security, sitting right here in this filing cabinet. Mom's own eyes filled with tears, her expression crumbling. Emma, we were doing our best. We truly were. No, I said, wiping my own tears away with the back of my hand, fueled by a sudden, cold anger. You weren't doing your best. You were doing what was easiest. You sacrificed my future so you wouldn't have to face your own failures. Dad stepped forward then, his hand outstretched as if to comfort me. We were desperate, Emma. You have to understand that. I don't, I said, taking a step back from him. I don't have to understand anything. You lied to me. You stole from me. You crossed a line that parents should never cross with their child. For a long, heavy moment, no one breathed. The only sound was the faint hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. The weight of 2 decades of deceit settled over us, crushing whatever was left of our family's foundation. Then, Mom whispered the question that was hanging in the air. What are you going to do? I looked down at my phone, which I'd used to take pictures of everything. Every statement, every transfer record, every letter from Grandpa detailing his hopes for my education, every single piece of proof. I looked up, meeting both of their terrified gazes. I'm going to talk to Grandpa, I said, my voice steady for the first time. He deserves to know what you did with his gifts. He deserves to know the truth. Dad's voice broke. Emma, please don't. He'll never forgive us. It will destroy him. Maybe, I said, my throat tight with unshed tears. But he deserves the truth. And so do I. Without another word, I turned and walked past them, out of the garage and into the evening air. I gripped my phone in my hand like a lifeline. For the first time in my entire life, the power wasn't theirs. It wasn't hidden in a filing cabinet or lost in a web of lies. It was mine, and I was finally going to use it. The drive to Grandpa's house was a blur. It felt like steering through a thick fog, where the road ahead was uncertain and shrouded in gray. My hands were steady on the wheel, but inside, everything was shaking. A tremor ran through me that had nothing to do with the car's engine. I kept replaying the scene in my mind, over and over my parents' faces when I confronted them. Their stammered excuses, their deflections, and then the heavy, damning silence that confirmed everything. The betrayal was a physical weight, a stone sitting cold and heavy in my chest. But underneath that crushing weight, there was something else, something sharper and hotter. It was determination. A quiet resolve had taken root. I wasn't their little girl anymore. Not the quiet, obedient daughter who always did as she was told. That version of me was gone, shattered by the truth I had uncovered. Grandpa lived just 40 minutes away, in a quaint little blue house, with a garden full of rose bushes that he trimmed with religious dedication every Sunday. It was his sanctuary, and for most of my life, it had been mine too. As I pulled up to the curb, I saw him sitting on the porch, rocking gently in his old wooden chair, a familiar silhouette against the setting sun. It was almost as if he'd been waiting for me, as if he somehow knew I was coming. He smiled when he saw me get out of the car, a warm, familiar smile that usually made everything feel right in the world. But today, it just made the knot in my stomach tighten. "Emma, sweetheart," he called out, his voice carrying the gentle rasp of age. "I didn't expect you so soon." I took a shaky breath and walked up the porch steps, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. "Grandpa?" I managed to say, my voice catching. "Can we talk?" His smile softened into a look of concern. "Of course," he said, pushing himself up from the chair with a slow, deliberate movement. "Let's go inside. It's getting a little chilly out here." His living room was just as I remembered it, filled with a comforting scent of old books and cedar wood. It was the smell of every childhood summer, of afternoons spent reading on his worn-out armchair, feeling safe and protected from the world. We sat down on the floral couch, the cushions sinking under our weight. I took another deep breath, trying to steady myself, trying to find the right words. Grandpa, uno se radiera, parlos. Grandpa, I found something. My voice trembled, betraying the calm I was trying so hard to project. It's about the fund, the money you set aside for me when I was born. His warm, welcoming expression flickered and then shifted. A shadow of suspicion crept into his eyes, tightening the skin around them. What about it? He asked, his tone suddenly cautious. Without saying another word, I unlocked my phone and handed it to him. This, I whispered. He took the phone, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then he began to swipe. One by one, he looked at the images I had saved, the bank statements I'd found hidden in my father's desk. The transaction histories showing transfer after transfer, the withdrawal slips with my mother's signature. With each swipe, his jaw tightened. His hands, usually so steady, began to shake. When he reached the final image, a screenshot showing a balance of just a few $100s, he set the phone down on the coffee table, very, very gently. The silence in the room was deafening. They used it, he whispered, the words barely audible. They used all of it. Hearing him say it out loud, confirming the reality of it, hurt more than the initial discovery. It was a final, brutal confirmation of my parents' deceit. I'm so sorry, Grandpa, I said, the tears I'd been holding back finally slipping down my cheeks. I couldn't stop them. I didn't know. I thought maybe there was a mistake, an explanation. No, he said, his voice low but firm, filled with a cold anger I had never heard from him before. The only mistake was me trusting them to protect what wasn't theirs to touch. For a long, heavy moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting away the seconds of this new, broken reality. Then, Grandpa stood up. He walked over to his old mahogany desk in the corner of the room and pulled open a drawer. From inside, he took out another folder. This one was newer, thicker than the one I remembered from my childhood. I hoped I'd never need this, he said, his voice heavy as he walked back toward me. What is it? I asked, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. He handed me the folder. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, there was a collection of documents, updated bank papers, official-looking legal forms, and account details, and on every single one of them, in clear, printed letters, was my name. I created a second account a few years ago, he explained, his voice softer now. A backup. I never told your parents about it. I just had a feeling, a small fear in the back of my mind, that something wasn't right. They were always talking about money problems, about bad investments. He paused, and his eyes, full of a deep, unwavering love, met mine. There is $600,000 in this one, Emma. And it is all yours. No one else has access. Not your mother, not your father, just you. My breath hitched in my throat. I stared at the numbers on the page, unable to process them. It felt unreal. Grandpa, I can't take this. Yes, you can, he said firmly, his hand covering mine. And you will, because you deserve a real start in life. A fair start, and because your future should never, ever depend on people who failed to protect it the first time. And that's when I cried. I really, truly cried. Not just for the money, but for the years of misplaced trust, for the betrayal that had ripped a hole in my family, and for the overwhelming, unconditional love that was sitting right here beside me. A beacon in the darkness. Grandpa just sat there, holding my hand, letting me cry it all out until there were no tears left. When I finally left his house hours later, the folder sitting securely on the passenger seat beside me, the world felt different. It wasn't fixed. It wasn't perfect. But it was clearer. The fog had lifted. That night, my parents called. And called. And called. Their names flashed on my screen, one after the other. I let the phone ring until it went to voicemail, each call a hollow echo of their betrayal. I didn't answer. Not yet. Por not yet. Because for the first time in my entire life, I had something that was truly mine. Something they couldn't touch, couldn't manipulate, couldn't take away my future. And finally, it belonged to me.